Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Melissa, and if you're new here, welcome. So I know today, if you've been following me, if you've been subscribed to my channel, I don't upload on Thursday. I usually upload Mondays, Wednesdays, Friday, and Sundays. But if you saw my last video, I did say that I was going to change it up. And because today is Thursday and it's September, I am going to be uploading Mondays and Friday. In the month of September, I'm going to be talking about serial killers. So that's why I uploaded today, because I wanted to start it today. But next video will be uploaded on Monday. So today we're going to start. So if you like any true crime, any of that, go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell. On Fridays, I will still be talking about missing children. That's the only thing that will not change. Every month on Fridays, I will be talking about missing children. I dedicate that to them, and I'm going to keep it the same. So today's Thursday, September, first serial killer. I know we probably have heard of him. It's gonna be Jeff Dunham. Yeah, we're gonna start with him. I will not be mentioning the names of the victims because I seen Bailey did this video, and she also did not mention the name of the victims just for privacy purposes. So I will be doing the same. I will not be mentioning the victims. This does it's a warning. I'm gonna give you a warning, and I need to start doing that in some of these videos. Give warnings. It does talk about cannibalism, sexual assault. So if you are triggered to any of that, go ahead and just go ahead, and I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Okay, you don't have to watch this one, okay, y'all, if you're not really into that. If you hear a little bit of music in the back room, in the back, my daughter's watching watching YouTube, and I need to get new earphones. I have these, but these don't have the little things, so I can't use them. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna start with his early childhood because it is kind of long. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So Jeff Dahmer was born on May 21st of 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the first of two sons of Jose and Edmund, and a Taliban machine instructor, and Elena Harbert Dunham, a McKenna University chemistry student and later research chemist. Lana Dunham was of German and Welsh ancestry, and Jose Dunham was of Norwegian and Irish ancestry. Some sources report Dunham was deprived of attention as an infant. Other sources, however, suggest that Dunham was generally devoted upon as an infant and tolerant by both parents, although his mother was known to be tense, greedy for both attention and pity, and argumentative with her husband and their neighbors. As Jeff entered first grade, Lani University studies kept him away from home much of the time when he was home, and his wife, a hypothetical who had depression, demand constant attention, and spent increasing amount of time in bed. On one occasion, she is known to have attempted suicide with equality. Constantly, neither parent devoted much time to their son, who later recalled that from early age he felt unsure of the solitude of the family, recalling extreme tension and numerous arguments between his parents during his early years. Jeff had been an genetic and happy child, but became notably subdued after double hernia surgery shortly before his 4th birthday. At elementary school, Jeff was regarded as a quiet and timid. One teacher later recalled that she detected early signs of abandonment in Jeff due to his mother's illness, the symptom of which increased when she became pregnant with her second child. Nevertheless, in grade school, Jeff did have a small number of friends. In October of 1966, the family moved to Dawson, Ohio. When Joyce gave birth in December, Jeffrey was allowed to choose the name of his new baby brother. He chose the name David. The same year, Lionel earned his degree and started work as an electrical chemist in nearby Orkin, Ohio. From an early age, Jeff manifested interest in dead animals. His fascination with dead animals may have begun when, at the age of 4, he saw his father removing animals' bones from beneath the family home. According to Lionel, Jeff was utterly thrilled by the sound of the bones made, and became preoccupied with animal bones, which is intelligently called his fire sticks. He occasionally searched beneath and around the family home for additional bones and explored the bodies of live animals to discover where their bones were located. In 1968, the family moved to Bath Township, Summit County, Ohio. This address was their third in 2 years and Jeff's sixth address since marriage. The home stood in 1.5 acres of woodland, with a small hut being only a short walk from the house, where Jeff began collecting large insects such as dragonflies and moths, and the skeletons of small animals such as chipmunks and squirrels. Some of these remains were preserved in jars of formaldehyde and stored within the hut. 2 years later, during a chicken dinner, Jeff asked Lionel what would happen if the chicken bones were placed in bleach. Lionel, pleased by what he believed to be his son's scientific courtesy, demonstrated how to safely bleach and preserve animal bones. Jeff incorporated these preventive techniques into his bone collecting and also began collecting dead animals, including roadkill, which he would dissect and bury beside the hut, with the skulls essentially placed atop makeshift crosses. According to one friend, Jeff explained to him that he was curious as to how animals fitted together. In one instant, in 1975, Jeff decapitated the carcass of a dog before nailing the body in a tree and emplating the skull upon a stake in the woodland behind his house as a prank. He later invited a friend to view the displays, claiming he had discovered the remains by chance. The same year, Lionel taught his son how to preserve animal bones. Joyce began increasing her daily consumption of quality, lective, and sleeping pills, further minimizing her tentacle contact with her husband and children. From his freshman year at Harvard High School, Jeff was seen as an outcast. By the age of 14, he began drinking beer and hard alcohol in daylight hours, frequently concealing his liquor inside the jacket he wore to school. He is known to have mentioned to one classmate who inquired why he was drinking scotch in a morning history class that alcohol has consumed was in my medicine. Although largely uncontentative in his freshman year, Jeff was seen by staff as polite, highly intelligent, but with average grades. He was a keen tennis player and played brief in high school band. When he reached puberty, Jeff discovered he was gay. He did not tell his parents. In his early teens, he had a brief relationship with another teen boy, although they never had intercourse. By Jeff's later admission, he began fantasizing about dominating and controlling a completely submissive male partner in his early to mid-teens. And his masturbatory fantasies gradually evolved to his focusing upon the chest and torso of the folks of his fanatics. These fanatics gradually became intervened with discussions. When he was about 16, Jeff conceived a fantasy of reading in conscience a particular male jogger he found attracted and then making sexual use of his body. On one occasion, Jeff concealed himself in a bushes with a baseball bat to lie in wait for this man. However, he did not pass by on the particular day. Jeff later said that this was his first attempt to attack someone. Despite being regarded as a loner and an old ball among his peers, Jeff became something of a class clown who often splashed pranks, which became known as doing a Dahmer. This included bleeding and stumbling, epilepsy issues, or cerebral palsy at school and local stores. By 1977, Jeff's grades had declined. His parents hired a private tutor with limited success. The same year, he attempted to save their marriage. His parents attended counseling sessions. They continued to quarrel frequently. When Lionel discovered Joyce had engaged in a brief affair in September of 1977, they both decided to divorce, telling their son they wished to do as amicably. Lionel moved out of the house early 1978, temporarily residing in a motel on North Cleveland Massillon Road. In May of 1978, Jeff graduated from high school. A few weeks before his graduation, one of his teachers observed Jeff sitting close to the school parking lot drinking several cans of beer. When the teacher threatened to report the matter, Jeff informed him he was experiencing a lot of problems at home and that the school guidance counselor was aware of them. That spring, Joyce and David moved out of the family home to live with relatives in Wisconsin. Jeff had just turned 18 and remained in the family home. Jeff's parents' divorce was finalized on July 24th of 1978. Joyce was awarded custody of her younger son in alimony payments. Jeff committed his first murder in 1978, 3 weeks after his graduation on June 18th. Jeff picked up a hitchhiker, I'm not going to say his name, who was almost 19. Jeff lured the youth to his house in the presence of drinking. Hikes who had been hitchhiking to a rock concert at Chapala Lake Park, Ohio, agreed to accompany Jeff to his house upon the promise of a few beers, with Jeff as he had the house to himself. According to Jeff, the sign of the bare chest hitchhike standing at a roadside strike his sexual feelings, although when Hike begins talking about girls, he knew any sexual passes he made would be rebuffed. After several hours of taking drinks and listening to music, wanted to leave. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to say hiking. That's not the guy's name. I wanted to leave and didn't want him to. Jeff blunked with a 10-pound dumbbell. He later stated he stuck twice from behind, with the dumbbell as set up on a chair. When felt unconscious, Dahmer strangled him to death with the bar of the dumbbell, then stripping the clothes from body before exploring his chest with his hands. Then masturbating as he stood above the corpse the following day. Jeff distracted body in his basement. He later buried the remains in his shallow grave in his backyard, before several weeks later, underneathing the remains and paring the flesh from the bones. He dissolved the flesh and axed it before flushing the solution down the toilet. He crushed the bones with a sledgehammer and starred them in the woodland behind the family home. 6 weeks after the murder of Jeff's father and his fiancée returned to his home, where they discovered Jeff living alone at the house. That August, Jeff enrolled at Ohio State University, hoping to major in business. Jeff's sole term at Ohio University was completely unprotected, largely because of his presenting alcohol abuse throughout the majority of the term. He received failing grades in Introduction to Anthropology classification and in Miss Science. The only course Jeff was successful at was roughly having received a B grade. His overall GPA was 0.45 and 0.4. One occasion, Lionel paid a surprise visit to his son, only to find his room strewn with empty liquor bottles. Despite his father having paid in advance for the second term, Jeff dropped out of the university after just 3 months. In January of 1977, on his father hurrying Jeff in enlist in the United States Army, where he trained as a medical specialist at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. On July 13th of 1979, he was developed to Blummer, West Germany, where he served in a combined medical and 2nd Platoon, 68th Amman Regiment, 8th Infantry Division. According to Polisher reports, in Jeff's first year of service, he was an average of slight above average shoulder. Owing to Jeff's alcohol abuse, his performance deteriorated in March of 1981. He was deemed insuitable for military service and was later discharged from the Army. He received an honorable discharge, as his superior did not believe that any problems Jeff had in the Army would be applied to civilian life. On March 24th of 1881, Dahmer was sentenced to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for debrief and provided with a plane ticket to travel anywhere in the country. Jeff later told police he felt he could not return home to face his father, so he opted to travel to Miami Beach, Florida, both because he was tired of the cold and attempt to live by his own means. In Florida, Jeff found an employment at a delicense and rent room near a motel. Jeff spent most of his salary in alcohol and was soon evicted from the motel for non-payment. He intentionally spent his evenings on the beach as he continued to work at the sandal shop, into phoning his father and asking to return to Ohio September the same year. After his return to Ohio, Jeff intentionally resided with his father and stepmother and insists on being declared numerous chores to occupy his time while he looked for work. He continued drinking heavily, and 2 weeks after his return, Jeff was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct, for which he was fined $60 and given a suspended 10-day jail sentence. Jeff's father tried unsuccessfully to wean his own son of alcohol in December of 1981. He and Dawn, Jeff's stepmother, sent him to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. Jeff's grandmother was the only family member to whom he displays any affection. They hope that her influence plus a change of scenery may pursue Jeff to quit drinking, find a job, and live responsibly. Intensely, Jeff living arrangement with his grandmother were harmonious. He accompanied her to church, willingly undertook chores, activities, sought work, and abided by the most of her house rules, although he did continue to drink and smoke. This new influence in his life intentionally brought his result. In early 1982, Jeff found employment as a chef of Philippines at the something with blood at the blood pump center. He held this job for a total of 10 months before being laid off. Jeff remained unemployed for over 2 years, during which he lived upon whatever money his grandmother gave him. Shortly before losing his job, Jeff was arrested for indecent exposure on August 7th of 1982 at Wisconsin State Fair Park. He was observed to expose himself on the south side of the Coliseum, in which 25 people were present, including a woman and children. For that accident, he was convicted and fined $50 plus court costs. In January of 1985, Jeff was hired as a mixer at the Milwaukee chocolate factory, where he worked from 11 to 7 a.m. 6 nights per week, with Saturday evenings off. Shortly after Jeff found this employment, an accident occurred in which he was prostrated by another man while sitting writing in the West Isles Public Library. The stranger threw Jeff a note offering to perform freely upon him. Although Jeff did not respond to this prostitution, the accident stirred in his mind the fantasy of control and dominance he had developed as a teenager, and he began to fantasize himself with gay bars, gay bathhouses, and bookstores. He is also known to have stolen a male mannequin from a store, which he briefly used as sexual stimulation, until his grandmother discovered the item stolen in the closet and demanded that he discarded. By late 1985, Dahmer had begun to regularly frequent the bathhouse, which he later described as being a relaxing place. But during his sexual encounters, he became frustrated at his partner's moving during the act. Following his arrest, he stated, "I trained myself to view people and objects of pleasure instead of as people." For this reason, beginning in June of 1986, he administered sleeping pills to his partners, giving them liquor laced with the sedatives. He then waited for his partner to fall asleep before performing visual sex acts. To maintain and adequate supplies of medication, Dahmer enforced doctors he worked nights and required the tablets to adjust his body to work considerable hours. After approximately 12 sessions and since the bathhouse administration revoked Jeff's membership, and he began to use hotel rooms to continue that practice. Shortly after his membership of the bathhouse he was revoked, Jeff read a report in a newspaper regarding the upcoming funeral of an 18-year-old male. He conceived the idea of stealing the freshly interred corpse and taking it home. According to Jeff, he attempted to dig up the coffin from the ground but found the soil too hard and abandoned the plan. On September 8th of 1986, Jeff was arrested upon charge of lascivious behavior for misdistributing the presence of two 12-year-old boys as he stood close to the river. He intentionally claimed he had merely been reuniting underwear that there was witness, but soon admitted the offense. The charge was changed to disorderly conduct, and in March 10th of 1987, Jeff was sentenced to 1 year of probation with additional instruction he was undergo counseling. On November 20 of 1987, Jeff at this time resided with his grandmother in West Allis, encountered a 25-year-old man from Orton, Michigan, at a bar and pursued him to return to the Ambassador Hotel, where Jeff had rented a room for the evening. According to Jeff, he had no intention of murdering, but rather intended to simply drug him, lie beside him as he explored his body. The following morning, however, Jeff awoke to find lying beneath him on the bed, his chest crushed and black and blue with bruises. Blood was also seeping from the corner of his mouth, and Jeff's first and one forearm were extensively bruised. Jeff stated that he had no memory of having killed, and later informed investigators that he could not believe this happened. To dispose of body, Jeff pursued a large suitcase in which he transferred the body to his grandmother, residing there 1 week later. He served the head, arms, and legs from the torso, then filled the bones from the body before cutting the flesh into pieces small enough to handle. Jeff then placed the flesh inside plastic garbage bags. He wrapped the bones inside sheets and pounded them into splinters with a slag hammer. The entire dismemberment process took Jeff approximately 2 hours to complete, and he disposed of all remains, including their severed head and the trash. For a total of 2 weeks following murder, Jeff retained the victim's head wrapped in a blanket. After 2 weeks, Jeff boiled the head in a mixture of soil and bleach in an effort to retrain the skull, which he then used as a semblance for masturbation. Eventually, the skull was rendered too brittle by his bleaching process, so Jeff fertilized and disposed of it. Following the murder, Jeff began to active seeking victims, most of whom had encountered or close to gay bars, and whom he typically lured to his grandmother's home. He would drug his victim with trazodone or Transpan before shortly after engaging in sexual. Let me see if I could.
Wait, that's from Lion King. He's the person from Lion King.
Trazodone before or shortly after engaging in sexual activity with them. Once he had redeemed his victim in conscience with sleeping pills, he killed them by strangulation. 2 months after Jeff encountered a 14-year-old Native American male prostitute named Jeff lured the youth to his home with an offer of $50 to pose for nude pictures. As Jeff resident, the pair engaged in sexual activities before Jeff drugged and strangled him on the floor of the cellar. Jeff left the body in the cellar for 1 week before dismembering in much the same manner he had with. He placed all of remains, including the skull, in the trash. The skull was boiled and cleaned and bleached before Dahmer knew he had been redeemed too bright by his process. His purvise of the skull 2 weeks later. He prolific. On March 24th of 1988, Dahmer met a 22-year-old bisexual man named outside a gay bar called the Phoenix. Jeff lured to his grandmother's residence, although the incentive in this occasion was $50 to simply spend the remainder of the night with him. He then drugged with sleeping pills and strangled him with a leather strap, with Jeff then performing oral sex upon the corpse. Jeff dismembered body with 24 hours of murdering him, again disposing the remains in the trash, and retained the skull before fertilizing it several months later. On April 23rd, Jeff lured another young man to his house. However, after giving the victim a drug coffee, both he and the intended victim heard Jeff's grandmother call, "Is that you, Jeff?" Although Jeff replied in a manner that led his grandmother to believe he was alone, she did observe that Jeff was not alone. Because of his Jeff upon not to kill this particular victim, instead waiting until he became conscious before taking him to the county general hospital. In September of 1988, Jeff's grandmother asked him to move out, largely because of his drinking and his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and for smells occasionally emanating from both the basement and the garage. Jeff found a one-bedroom apartment at 88 North 24th Street and moved into his new residence on September 25th. 2 days later, he was arrested for drugging and sexually founding a 13-year-old boy whom he had lured to his home, the pretext of posing nude for photographies. Jeff's father hired an attorney named General Boss to defend his son. At Boss' request, Jeff underwent a series of psychological evaluations prior to his upcoming court hearings. These evaluations revealed Jeff harbored deep feelings of alienation. A second evaluation 2 months later revealed Jeff to be an impulsive individual, suspicious of others, and dismayed by his lack of accomplishment in life. His probation officer would also reference in a 1987 diagnosis of Jeff suffered from I can't not say this word, personality disorder for possession to the court. On January 30th of 1989, Jeff pleaded guilty to a charge of second-degree sexual assault and intention of child for normal pursuit. Sentencing for the assault was suspended until May. On March 20, Jeff commenced a 10-day Easter absence from work, during which he moved back into his grandmother's home. 2 months after his conviction and 2 months prior to his sentence for sexual assault, Jeff murdered his victim, a mixed-race 24-year-old Aspire model named, and I'm reading these laws because I don't want to mention the name, so I'm making sure that I do not mention the name like I did in the first, and I apologize for that, who Dahmer met at a gay bar on March 25th of 1889. According to Jeff, on this particular occasion, he was not looking to commit a crime. However, shortly before closing time, the evening Sears that's the place of where he was, just started talking to me. Jeff lured to his grandmother's home, where the pair engaged in oral sex before Jeff drugged and strangled. The following morning, Jeff placed the corpse in his grandmother's bathtub, where he decapitated the body before attempting to flay the corpse. He then stripped the flesh from the body and pulverized the bones, which he again disposed in of a trash. According to Jeff, he found particularly attractive was the first victim from whom he permanently retained any body parts. He preserved head and genitalia in a content and stored them in a wooden box, which he later placed in his work locker. When he moved to a new address the following year, he took the remains there. On May 23rd of 1989, Jeff was sentenced to 5-year probation and 1 year in the house of correction with work release permit. In order that he be able to keep his job, he was also required to register as a sex offender. 2 months before his scheduled release from the work camp, Jeff was paroled from this regained his 5-year probation imposed in 1989. Began at this point. On release, Jeff temporarily moved back to his grandmother's home and was housed before May 1990, moving into the Oxford Apartments located on North 25th Street in I'm not even gonna say it. Although located in a high crime area, the apartment was close to his workplace, was furnished, and a $300 per month, inclusive of all bills, including electric, was economical. On May 14th of 1990, Jeff moved out of his grandmother's house into the 924th North 25th Street apartment 213, taking a mummified head and genitals with him. Within 1 week of his moving in his new apartment, Jeff had killed his sixth victim, was a 32-year-old male prostitute to whom Jeff lured to an apartment in 2013 with the promise of 51st sex. Inside the apartment, he gave Smith a drink laced with 7 sleeping pills, then manually strangled him. The following day, Jeff purchased a Polaroid camera with which he took several pictures of body in sexy positions before dismembering him in the bathroom. He boiled the legs, arms, and pelvis in steel kettle with soils, which allowed him to then rinse the bones in his sink. Jeff dissolved the remainder of skeleton, including the skull, in container filled with acid. He later spray painted Smith's skull, which he placed alongside the skull upon back. Damn, I keep saying their last name. I'm sorry, guys. Sears. I'm back to inside mental filling cabinet. Approximately 1 week after the murder of, on or about May 27, Jeff lured another young man to his apartment. On this occasion, however, Jeff himself accidentally consumed the drink laid with sedative intended for compassion by his guest. When he awoke the following day, he discovered his intended victim had stolen several items of his clothing, $300 and a watch. Jeff never reported the accident to the police, although on May 29th, he divulged to his probation officer that he had been robbed. On January 9, 1990, Jeff lured a 27-year-old acquaintance named to his apartment. He drugged and strangled. On this occasion, rather than immediately acidifying the skeleton or repeating previous process of bleaching, which had rendered private victims' skulls brittle, Jeff placed skull in his freezer for several months in the hope it would not retain moisture. Freezing the skeleton did not remove moisture, and the skeleton of this victim would be acidified several months later. Jeff accidentally destroyed the skull when he placed it in the oven to dry, as process that caused the skull to spoil. Jeff himself was to later inform police he had felt rotten about murder, as he had been unable to retain any parts of his body. Less than 3 months after the murder of, Jeff encountered a 22-year-old Chicago native named outside a bookstore on the corner of North 27th Street. This victim agreed to accompany Jeff to his apartment from 50 and further agreed to allow him to listen to his heart and stomach. When Jeff attempted to perform oral sex upon, he was informed that cost you extra. Whereupon Jeff gave his in-need victim a drink laced with 2 sleeping pills. On this occasion, Jeff had only 2 sleeping pills to give his victim. Before he killed by slashing his carotid artery with the same knife he used to discard his victims' bodies. The victim bled to death within minutes. Dahmer then posed the nude body for vigorous suggestive Polaroid photographs before placing his bathtub for dismember. Jeff repeatedly kissed and talked to the severed head while he dismembered the remains of the body. Jeff wrapped hard biscuits and flotation of flesh from the legs in plastic bags and placed them in the fridge for later composition. He boiled the remaining flesh and organ into a jelly-like substance using Soilex, which again enabled him to rinse the flesh off the skeleton, which intended to retain. To preserve the skeleton, Jeff placed the bones in a light bleach solution for 24 hours before allowing them to dry upon a cloth for 1 week. The severed head was intentionally placed in the refrigerator before also being stripped of flesh and then painted and coated with enamel. 3 weeks after the murder of his victim, on September 24, Dahmer encountered a 22-year-old man at the Grand Avenue Mall and pursued him to return to his apartment for a few drinks. With additional money and offer, he would pose for photographies. In his statement to police after his arrest, Jeff stated that after giving a drink laced with sensitive. He did not feel attached to him, but was afraid to allow him to awake in case he would be angry over having been drugged. There before, he strangled him and dismembered the body, intentionally retaining no body parts whatsoever. He photographed the dismembered process and retained these photographies, which later aid in the subsequent identification. Following the murders of Jeff did not kill anyone for almost 5 months. Although on a minimum of 5 occasions between October 1990 and February of 1981, he unsuccessfully attempted to lure men to his apartment. He is also known to have regularly complained of feeling of both anxiety and depression to his probation officer throughout 1990, with frequently reference to his sexuality, his solitary lifestyle, financial difficulties, and several occasions. Jeff also is known to have referred to harboring suicidal thoughts. So on February of 1991, Jeff observed a 17-year-old standing at a bus stop near Mark University. Sorry, guys. Mark University. According to Jeff, he lurched into his apartment with an offer of money for posing for nudes photo. With that added incentive of sexual intercourse, Jeff drugged, cuffed his hand behind his back, and then strangled him to death with a leather strap. He then dismembered, retained the youth's skull, hands, and genitalia, and photographing each stage of the dismember process. Less than 2 months later, on April 7th, Jeff encountered a 19-year-old walking to get a key cut. Lynn was heterosexual. Jeff lured to his apartment where he drugged him, drilled a hole on his skull, and poured hot acid into it. Y'all thought it wasn't gonna get worse. Yeah, it just got worse. According to Jeff, a work after this experiment, which Jeff had conceived in hope of introducing a permanent service state, saying, "I have a headache. What time is it?" In response to this, Jeff again drugged, then strangled him. He decapitated and retained his skull, and then fled body, placing the skin in solution of cold water and salt for several weeks in the hope of permanently retaining his relenting his dispose of skin when noted he had become too frayed and brittle. By 1991, fellow residents of the apartments had repeatedly complained to the building managers of foul smell emanating from apartment 213, in addition to the sound of falling objects and the occasional sounds of a chainsaw. Prince Will did not contact Jeff in response to these complaints in several occasions, although he intentionally accused the odors emanating from his apartment as being caused by his freezer breaking, causing the contents to become spoiled. On one later occasion, he informed Prince Will that the reason for the recent of order was that the server of his tropical fish had recently died and that he would take care of that matter. On the afternoon of May 26 of 1991, Jeff encountered a 14-year-old teenager on Wisconsin Avenue. Unknown to Jeff, was the younger brother of the boy who he had in 1998. That he had molested in 1988. He approached the youth with an offer of money to accompany him into his apartment to pose for parlor picture. According to Jeff, was intentionally related to the proposal before changing his mind and accompanying him to his apartment, where the youth posed for 2 pictures in his underwear before Jeff drugged him into conscience and performed oral sex on him. On this occasion, Jeff drilled a single hole into skull, though which he injected acid into the front lobe before fell unconscious. Jeff led the boy in his bedroom, where the body of 31-year-old whom Jeff had killed 3 days earlier lay naked on the floor. According to Jeff, he believed that saw his body, yet did not react to seeing the bloated corpse, likely because of the effects of sleeping pills he had instead and the acid Jeff had intended through his skull. Soon became conscious, whereupon Jeff drank several beers while lying alongside him before leaving his apartment to drink at a bar. They purchased more alcohol. In the early morning hours of May 27, Jeff returned towards his apartment to discover sitting naked on the corner of 25th and State, talking in with three distressed young women standing near him. Jeff approached the woman and told that who he referred by the alias was his friend, and attempt to lead him to his apartment by arm. The three women disowned Jeff, explaining they had called phone 911. Upon the arrival of two police officers, Jeff demurred, relaxed. He told the officer that was his 19-year-old boyfriend that he had drunk too much following a quarrel and that he frequently behaved in this manner and intoxicated. Jeff added that his lover had consumed whiskey that evening. The three women were spread, and when one of the trio attempted to indicate to one of the officers, both of whom had observed no injuries beyond scrap to knee and believed him to be intoxicated. That had blood upon his testicle, was bleeding from his recon, and that he had similarly struggled against Jeff's attempts to walk to his apartment prior to the arrival. The officer actually informed her to butt out, shut the hell up, and to not interfere. Shortly after the arrival of the police officers, three members of the fire department arrived at the scene. These individuals also seemed for injuries and provide a yellow blanket for the police officers to cover. One of the three believed needed treatment, but the police officer directed the fire department personnel to leave. Shortly thereafter, Officer Rich Porkin arrived at the scene. He and followed by escorted Jeff into the apartment, reportedly committed in general crime in the neighborhood and of his appreciation of the police. Inside the apartment, any effort to verify his claim that he and were lovers, Dom showed the officer the two semi-nude pictures he had taken of the youth in previous evening, though said he smelled nothing unusual. Garbage later stated he noted a strange sense remains of excitement inside the apartment. This order image from the decomposing body of Jeff stated that to investigate this order, an officer simply peeked his head around the bedroom but really didn't take a good look. The officer then left with the departing remark that Jeff take good care of. This incident was listed by officer as a domestic dispute. Y'all could have stopped this effing person. Upon the departure of the three officers from his apartment, Jeff again injected acid into brain. On the second occasion, an infection proved fatal. The following day, on May 28th, Jeff took a day leave from work to devote himself to dismember one of the bodies, and he retained both victims' skulls. On June 30th, Jeff traveled to Chicago, where he encountered a 20-year-old named at a bus station. Except Jeff offered to travel in per professional photo shoot at the apartment. Jeff drugged, strangled, and dismembered and placed his head in internal organs and spread plastic bags in the freezer, with no reporting missing. 5 days later, on July 5th, Dahmer lured 23-year-old from Chicago bar to his apartment on the promise of spending the weekend with him. He drugged and infected a boiling water through his skull, sending him into a coma from which he died 2 days later. On July 15th, Jeff encountered 24-year-old and at the corner of the 27th and Conley agreed to Jeff refused posing nude for photography, Janelle, sorry guys, and accompanied him to his apartment, where the pair engaged in tentative sexual activity before Jeff drugged. In the occasion, Jeff intended to prolong the time he spent with while alive. After unsuccessfully attempting to render conscious with coliform, He phoned his workplace to request a day of absence. This was granted, although the next day he was suspended. After struggling, had sex with the corpse before dismembering him. He placed head and heart in the refrigerator and his skull in the freezer. 4 days later, on July 19th, Jeff received word that he was fired. Upon receipt of this news, Jeff lured a 25-year-old to his apartment, was strangled and left lying on Dahmer's bed, covered with a sheet for 2 days. On July 21st, Jeff removed these sheets to find the head covered in moths. I'm just about to whereupon he decapitated the body, cleaned the head, and placed in the refrigerator. He later asphyxiated torture along with those 2 other victims killed with previous moth. So now we're gonna be to his arrest, guys. He finally gets arrested. On July 22nd, 1991, Jeff approached 3 men with an offer of $100 to accompany him to his apartment to pose for the new photos, drinking beer and simply keep him company. One of the 3, 32-year-olds, agreed to accompany him to his apartment. Upon entering Jeff's apartment, a note, a full outer, and several boxes of sulfuric acid on the floor, which Jeff claimed to use for cleaning bricks. After some minor conversation, response to Jeff requested to turn his head and view his tropical fish, whereupon Jeff placed a handcuff upon his wrist. When the victim asked what's happening, Jeff unsuccessfully attempted the cuffs to his wrists together, then told the victim to accompany him to the bathroom to pose for nude pictures. While inside the bathroom, the victim noted nude male posters on the wall, and that a videotape of the Oxyx third was playing. He also noted a blue 57-gallon drum in the corner, which a strong odor image. Jeff then brandished a knife and informed the victim he intended to take nude pictures of him and intended to appease Jeff. The victim unbuttoned his shirt, saying he would allow him to do so if he would remove the handcuffs and put the knife away. In response to this promise, Jeff simply turned his attention towards the TV. The victim observed Jeff rocking back and forth and chanting before turning his attention back to him. He placed his head on the victim's chest, listening to his heartbeat, and with the knife pressed against his intent victim, informed he intended to eat his heart. In conscious attempts to prevent Jeff from attacking him, the victim repeated that he was Jeff's friend and he was not going to run away. Jeff had decided he was going to either jump from a window or run through the unlocked front door upon the next available opportunity. When the victim next stated he needed to use the bathroom, he asked if they could sit with the beer in the living room where there was air conditioner. Jeff consented, and the pair walked to the living room. When the victim exited the bathroom inside the living room, the victim waited until he observed Jeff had a momentary lapse of construction before requesting to use the bathroom again. When the victim rose from the couch, he noted Jeff was not holding the handcuffs, whereupon Jeff punched him in the face. The victim punched him in the face, knocking Jeff off balance and ran out the front door. At 11:30 p.m. on July 22nd, the victim flagged down 2 police officers, Robert Ruth and Rafael Muller, at the corner of North 25th Street. The officer noted that the victim had handcuffs attached to his wrist, whereupon he explained to the officer that a freak had placed the handcuffs upon him and asked if the police could remove them. When the officer's handcuffs key failed to fit the brand of handcuffs, the victim agreed to accompany the officer to the apartment where the victim stated he had spent the previous 5 hours before escaping. When the officer and the victim arrived at the apartment of 223rd, Jeff invited the three inside and acknowledged he had indeed placed a handcuff upon the victim, although he offered no explanation as to why he had done so. At this point, the victim revealed to the officer that Jeff had also brainwashed a large knife upon him and that this had happened in the bathroom. Jeff made no comment to his revelation, indicating to one of the officers Merle that the keys to the handcuffs was in his bedside dresser. As Merle entered the bathroom, Jeff attempted to pass Merle to himself, retrieve the key, whereupon the second officer presented rude information to back off. In the bathroom, Merle noted that was indeed a large knife beneath the bed. He also saw an upon drawer which upon closer inspection contained scores of Polaroid pictures, many which were of human bodies in various stages of dismemberment. Merle noted the director indicated that he had been taken in the very apartment in which they were standing. Merle walked into the living room to show them to his partner, iterating the words, they are real. When Jeff saw that Merle was holding several of his spoilers, he fought with the officer in an effort to resist arrest. The officer quickly overpowered him, cuffed his hand behind his back, and called a second squad car for backup. At this point, Merle opened the refrigerator to reveal the freshly served head of a black male on the bathroom shelf. As Jeff lay pinned on the floor beneath Roth, he returned his head towards the office and moved the words, "For what I did, I should be dead." And more details, such as the apartment conducted by the Police Criminal Investigation Bureau, revealed a total of 4 severed heads in Jeff's kitchen. A total of 7 cloths, some painted, some bleached, were found in Jeff's bedroom inside a closet. In addition, investigators discovered collected blood dripping upon a tray as at the bottom of Jeff's refrigerator, plus 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle, which wrapped inside plastic bags upon these shelves. In Jeff's freezer, investigators discovered inches torso, plus a bag of human organs and flesh skull in the ice of the bottom. Elsewhere in the apartment 213, investigators discovered 2 entire skulls, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed impressive peanuts, a mummified skull, in the 57-gallon drum, 3 further dismembered torso, dissolving in the acid solution. A total of 74 Polaroid pictures deleting the dismember of Jeff's victims were found. In reference to the recovery of body parts in an aircraft at 1924 North 25th Street, the chief medical examiner later said it was more like dismantling someone Muslim than actual crime scene. Beginning in the early hours of July 23rd of 1991, Jeff was questioned by the detective Kennedy as the murders he had committed and the evidence found in his apartment. Over the following 2 weeks, Kennedy and later Detective Dennis Murphy conducted numerous interviews with Jeff, which went combined total over 60 hours. Jeff waived his right to have a lawyer present throughout his interrogations, adding his wishes to confess all he had created this horror and it only makes sense. I do everything to put an end to it. He readily admitted to having murdered 16 young men in Wisconsin since 1987, with one further victim killing in Ohio back in 1978. Most of Jeff's victims had been returned conscious prior to their murder, although some had died as a result of having acid or boiled water infected in their brain. As he had no memory of the murders of his second victim, he was unsure whether he was conscious when beaten to death, although he did not consent. It was possible that his viewing that exposed chest of while in drunken sport may have led him to unsuccessfully attempt to tear heart from his chest. Although the murders Jeff committed after moving into the apartments have involved a ritual of posing the victim's body in vexed positions, typical with the chest towards outwards prior to dismember. Jeff readily admitted to engaging in necrophilia with several of his victims' body, including performing sexual acts in their vesicle as he dismembered their bodies in his bathtub. having noted that much of the blood pooled inside his victim's chest after death. Jeff first removed their internal organs, then suspended the torture so their blood drained into his bathtub. Before disseminating any organs he did not wish to retain, impairing the flesh from the body. The bones he wished to dispose of were pulverized or acidified with soiled and bleached solution used to aid the preservation of the scales and the skull, and wished to keep. In addition, Jeff confessed to having consumed the hearts, livers, biceps, and portion of thighs of several victims he killed within the previous year, often terrorizing the flesh and organ prior to consuming them in meals flavored with various condiments. Describing the increase in his rate of killing in the 2 months prior to his arrest, Jeff stated he had been completely swapped along with the compulsion to kill, adding it was an insane and never-ending desire to be with someone at whatever cost. Someone good looking, really nice looking. It just filled my thoughts all day long. When asked as to why he had preserved a total of 7 skulls in the entire skeleton of 2 victims, Jeff stated he had been in the process of constructing a private altar of victims' skulls, which he had intended to display on the black table located in his living rooms, and upon which he had photographed the bodies of many of his victims. The display of skulls was to obtain at each side, which the complete skeleton of the 4 server heads found in his kitchen were to be removed of the flesh, and the use of this altar as he was scalped at least in the further victims in C-streak were to be placed at each end of the black table, above which Jeff intended to place a large blue lamp with extending blue globe lights. The entire construction was to be placed before a window covered with the black opera shore curtains, in front of which Jeff intended to sit in the back leather chair. When asked in November 18, 1981 interview who the altar was dedicated to, Jeff replied, "Myself. It was a place where I could feel at home." He further describes his intent alert as a place to medication, from where he believed he could draw a sense of power, adding, if this had happened 6 months later, this was what they would have found. On July 25th of 1991, Jeff was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August 22nd, he had been charged with further 11 murders committed in Wisconsin. On September 14th, investigators in Ohio, having uncovered hundreds of bones, fragments, and wounds behind the address in which Jeff had confessed to killing his first victim, formally identified 2 molars and a vertebra with X-ray records of. 3 days later, Jeff was charged by authorities in Ohio with murder. Jeff was not charged with the attempted murder of, nor with the murder of. He was not charged with murder because a district attorney only brought charges where murder could be proven beyond responsible doubt. And Jeff had no memory of actually committing the particular murder, for which no physical evidence of the crime exists. At a scheduled preliminary hearing on January 13th of 1992, Dahmer pleaded guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder. Jeff's trial began on January 30th of 1982. He was tried for the 15 counts of first-degree murder before Judge Lawrence Grant by pleading guilty on January 13th to the charges brought against him. Jeff had waived his right to an intentional trial to establish guilt as defined as Wisconsin law. The issue debated by opposing counsel of Jeff's trial was determine whether he suffered from either a mental or personality disorder. The prosecution claimed that any disorder did not deprive Jeff of the ability to participate the criminal of his conduct or to deprive him for the ability to receive his impulse. The defense argued that Jeff suffered from mental disease and was driven by assumption and impulse he was unable to control. Defense expert argued that Jeff was insane due to his necrophilia drive, his compulsion to have sexual encounters with corpses. Defense expert Dr. Fred Billern testified that Jeff wasn't able to confront his conduct at the time that he committed the crimes due to his paraphilia, or more specifically necrophilia. Dr. Judith Baker, as a professor of psychiatric and psychology, was the second expert witness for the defense. Baker also diagnosed Jeff as a necrophilia, although she added Jeff had informed her he preferred comatose sexual partners to deceased ones 75% of the time. The final defense expert testified forensic psychiatrist Dr. Carl Winston diagnosed Jeff with necrophilia, borderline personality disorder, psychopath personality disorder, alcohol dependence, and a psychological disorder. On February 8th, Dr. Fred Falser testified in behalf of the prosecution. Falser testified to his belief that Jeff was without mental disease or defect at the time he committed the murders. He described Jeff as calculating and cunning individual, able to differentiate between right and wrong, with the ability to control his action, and who to lose overpower his morals. Although False did state his belief that Jeff was pedophilia, his conclusion was that Jeff was not a sadist. The second and final witness appeared for the prosecution. Forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz began his testimony on February 12th. Dietz testified that he did not believe Jeff had any form of mental disease or defect at the time that he committed the crimes, stating Jeff wanted to great lengths to be alone with his victims, to have no witness. He explained that there was an ample evidence that Jeff prepared in advance for each murder, therefore his crimes were not impulsive. Although Diaz did not concede an inquest of paraphilia was not a matter of personal choice, he also stated that his belief that Jeff's habit of becoming intoxicated prior to committing each of the murders was significant, stating, if he had an impulse to kill or a compulsion to kill, he wouldn't have to drink alcohol to overcome it. He only has to drink alcohol to overcome it because he's in habit against killing. Dia also noted that Jeff strongly intensified with the villain's return of Jetty, particularly the level of power held by these characters. Exploding on the specific of these movies on Jeff's psyche and many of the murders committed at the Oxford apartments. Diaz explained that Jeff consciously viewed the scene from the films before searching for a victim. Diaz diagnosed Jeff with substance use disorder, paraphilia, and personality disorder. Sorry, guys. Two court-appointed mental health professionals testifying independently of either prosecution or defense were forensic psychologist George Palermo and clinical psychologist Samuel. Palermo stated in the murders were the result of the pent-up aggression with himself. He killed those men because he wanted to kill the source of his homosexual attraction to them. In killing them, he killed what he hated himself. Palermo concluded that Jeff has served mixed personality disorder with the anxiously obsession, conclusive sadistic, fetishistic, borderline, and necrophilia features, but otherwise legal sense. Freeman testified that it was a longing for compassion that caused Jeff to kill. He stated Jeff is not psychotic. He spoke kindly of Jeff, describing him as an able, pleasant to be with, courteous, with sense of humor, convincingly handsome, and changing in manner. He was and still is a bright young man. He denies Jeff with the personality disorder not to otherwise specific feature in borderline persecutive and sadistic disorder. The trial lasts 2 weeks. On February 14, both counsel delivered their closing arguments to the jury, which counsel was allowed to speak for 2 hours. The defense attorney argued first, repeatedly hacking to the testimony of the mental health professional, almost all of whom had agreed Jeff was active with his mental disease. Boyce argued that Jeff's compulsive killing had been a result of sickness and he discovered, not chose. Boyce portrayed Jeff as a desperately lonely and profoundly sick individual, so out of control he could not confront his conduct anymore. Following defense counsel's 75 minutes closing argument, Michael McCann delivered his closing argument for the prosecution, describing Jeff as a sane man and fully control of his action, who simply strove to avoid detection. McCann described Jeff as a calculating individual who killed to control his victims and retain their bodies, merely to refer himself at a parted period of sexual pleasure. McCann argued that by pleading guilty but insane to the charges, Jeff was seeking to escape responsibility for his crimes. Um, on February 15th, the court reconvened to hear the verdict. Jeff was ruled to be sane and not suffering from mental disorder at the time of the 15 murders, which was he was tied, although in each count, 2 of 12 juries significant their distance. Formal sentencing was postponed until February 17th. On this day, Jeff's attorney announced his client wished to address the court. Jeff then approached a lectern and read from the statement prepared by himself and his defense as faced the judge. In the statement, Jeff emphasized that he had never desired freedom following his arrest and that he frequently wishes for his own death. He further stressed that none of his murders had been motivated by hatred, and he understood that nothing he either said or did could not undo the terrible harm he caused to the families of his victims in the city of Ohio, and that he and his doctors believed his criminal behavior had been motivated by mental disorder. Jeff added that this medical knowledge has given him some peace, and that although he understood the society would never forgive him, he hoped God would. Jeff closed his statement with the following: I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor, and I'm prepared for your sentence, in which I know will be the maximum. As for no creation. He then returned to his seat to await formal sentencing. Jess was sentenced to life in prison plus 10 years upon the first 2 counts, with the remaining 13 counts carrying majority sentence of life imprisonment plus 17 years. The death penalty was not an option for Judge Grant to consider at the penalty phase, as Wisconsin had abolished a capital punishment in 1953. Upon hearing of Jeff's sentencing, his father Lionel and stepmother Sherry requested to be allowed a 10-minute private meeting with their son before was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage to begin his sentence. This request was granted, and Truro exchanged hugs, well wishes before Don was executed away. 3 months after his conviction, Jeff was extradited to Ohio to be tried for the murder of his first victim, you did not hear that name. For his first victim, in court, he stayed just 45 minutes. Jeff again pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a 16 term of life imprisonment on May 1st of 1992. Upon sentencing, Jeff was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution. For the first year of his incarceration, Jeff was placed in solitary confinement due to the concern of his physical safety should he come in contact with fellow inmates. With Jeff constant after 1 year in solitary confinement, he was transferred to a less secure unit where he was assigned 2-hour daily work detail cleaning in the toilet block. Shortly after completing his lengthy confessions in 1991, Jeff had requested to Detective Murphy that he be given a copy of the Bible. The request was granted, and Jeff gradually devoted himself to Christianity and became a born-again Christian. On his father arguing, he also read Christie's book from the institution, Creation Research. On May 1994, Jeff was baptized by Roy Clifton in Minister Church of the Christ and graduated Oklahoma Christian University in the prison Whirlpool. Following his baptism, Clift visited Jeff on a weekly basis up until November of 1984. Jeff and Rayfleigh regularly discussed the process of death, and Jeff questioned whether he was sinning against God by continuing to live. Referring to his crimes in 1994 interview with Stone Fields and Deadline NBC, Jeff has stated, if a person doesn't think that there is a God to be accountable to, then what is the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep within accepted range? This is how I thought anyway. On July 3rd of 1994, a fellow inmate, Oswald Dorothy attempt to slash Jeff's throat with a razor and a toothbrush, as Jeff said in the prison chapel after the weekly church service was concluded. Jeff received a pacifical wounds and was not seriously hurt in the accident. According to his Jeff family, he had long been ready to die and accepted any punishment which he may endure in prison. In addition to his father and stepmother maintaining regular contact, Jeff's mother Joyce also maintained regular contact with her son, although prior to his arrest, the two had not seen each other since Christmas of 1983. Joyce related that in her weekly phone calls, whatever she expressed concern for her son's physical well-being, Jeff responded with comments to the effect of, "It doesn't matter, Mom. I don't care if something happens to me." On the morning of November 28th of 1994, Jeff left his cell to conduct his assignment work detail. Accompanying him were two fellow inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarf. The three were left unsupervised in the showers of the prison gym for approximately 20 minutes. At the approximately 8:10, Jeff was discovered on the floor of the bathrooms of the gym suffering from extreme head wounds. He had been severed, bludgeoned about the head and face with a 20-inch 51 centimeter metal bar. His head had also been repeatedly stuck against the wall in the assault. Although Jeff was still alive and was rushed to an early hospital, he was pronounced dead an hour later. Anderson had also been beaten with the same instrument and died 2 days later from his wound. What the hell the other guy had to do? Why did you kill? Never mind. Scarf, who was serving life sentence for a murder committed in 1990, informed authorities he had first attacked Jeff with the metal bar as Jeff was claiming a staff locker room before attacking Anderson as Anderson cleaned an inmate locker room. According to Scarf, Jeff did not yell or make any noise as he was attacked. Immediately after attacking both men, Scarf, who was thought to be psychotic, returned to his cell and informed a prison guard, "God told me to do it. Jesse, Anderson, and Jeff Dahmer are dead." And Scar was admitted had not planned the attacks in advance. Although he later divulged to investigators he had concealed the 20-inch iron bar using to kill both men in his clothing shortly before the killings. Upon learning of his death, Jeff's mother Joyce responded angrily to the media. "Now is everybody happy? Now that he's bludgeoned to death, is that good enough for everyone?" The response of the families of Jeff's victims was mixed. Although it appears most were pleased with his death, the direct attorney who prosecuted Jeff continued against turning Scar into a folk hero, noting that Jeff's death was still murder. On May 15, 1995, Scar was sentenced to 2 additional terms of life imprisonment for the murders of Jeff and Anderson. Jeff had stated Jeff has stated in his will that he wished for one service to be conducted and that he wished to be cremated. On September 1950, Jeff's body was cremated and his ashes divided between his parents. On August 5th of 1991, at the nature and scale of Jeff's crimes intentionally came to the light a candlelight visual to celebrate the heal of community. It was attended by more than 400 people. Present at the vigil were community leaders, gay rights activists, and family members of service of Jeff's victim. Organizers state the purpose of the visual was to enable to share their feelings of pain and anger over what happened. Jeff's murders were committed at the time of high radical tension. A professor of community study at University of Wisconsin, Walter Frederick Wood, late state race relations in the city had been in a state of despair for nearly a decade. At the time of Jeff's arrest in August of 1991, an interview given to the Christian Science Monitor, Raphael stated that the news of the murders, as well as the conduct of police officer John Berksey and Joseph Gash with regards to the victim, exacerbated and highlighted race and tension within the city. And that is a sad story of, not the sad story. That's the story of Jeff Dahmer. To be honest with you, I I'm glad they killed him. I'm sorry. I'm glad they killed him. You could be like, Melissa, you're being cold-hearted. That's not you. You should not be saying. No, I am glad he's gone. People are not paying taxes for his ugly being alive, breathing the same air. He said it. He said he wanted to die. Somebody did. Somebody must have been paying attention to his trial, and he did it. He said, "Oh well, I'm just gonna be here for life anyways. I'm gonna die here. Might as well just. I'm just gonna kill you. You wanted to die? I'm gonna kill you anyway." So, and that's what happened, guys. And I did mention some of the victims, but guys, I'm so sorry for that. I really didn't mean to. It was just, this is my first time doing reading reading about a serial killers, and I naming the victim. It was really kind of hard. I don't know how Bailey did it, girl. Bailey, you good at that. I'm gonna put her her YouTube name at the bottom so y'all could go ahead and subscribe. She hasn't been posting on Mondays. Usually she does post on Mondays, but yeah. Also, I got this idea that I'll be posting every month a new a whole month of new. I'm gonna be talking about just one topic. I got this idea from Gabby. Also, I will also leave her YouTube name so y'all can go ahead and subscribe. I will see y'all tomorrow with a new case.